The majority of the country issued dire warnings even before Britain officially left the European Union in 2020 and undoubtedly after it did so. The nation is currently experiencing an economic crisis. The pound's value is declining. The solution must be in Europe. The government is under pressure to address the elephant in the room as evidence of Brexit's long-term damage to the British economy grows. Welcome back to an amazing video of World Economy. There is no doubt, according to the head of Britain's largest airport operator, that Brexit has hurt the country's economy and massively exacerbated workforce shortages. The UK is becoming less competitive, according to Charlie Cornish, chief executive of MAG, which controls Manchester, Stansted and East Midlands airports. One of the facilities most severely impacted by interruption this year was Manchester Airport, which was unable to handle the post-COVID surge in travel, resulting in long lines and chaotic situations in the security and luggage rooms. The UK's main opposition Labour Party on 22nd of November ruled out a return to the EU single market or customs union. That is, if it wins the next general election, which is scheduled for no later than January of 2025. This happens despite criticising the Conservative government's fiscal plans as the country's economy faces a recession and the sharpest fall in living standards since records began. Instead of making Brexit work, Labour leader Keir Starmer said at a business conference, but economists say one or both of these steps could help soften the blow from the country's long-term economic growth prospects. The administration has refrained from discussing the impacts of former ex-Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Brexit plan, with ministers blaming only the energy crisis brought on by Russia's war with Ukraine and the lingering repercussions of the COVID-19 outbreak for the country's economic difficulties. However, the OECD predicted on Tuesday that among the G20 group of 20 leading developed and emerging nations, only Russia would have a greater economic contraction than the UK in 2023. The 0.2% expansion anticipated for 2024 is tied for the weakest with Russia. Germany's economy is particularly vulnerable to rising energy prices because of its reliance on Russian gas imports, and the UK's growth prospects are worse than those of Germany. The OECD predicted that lingering uncertainty and higher capital costs will continue to have a negative impact on businesses' investments in the UK, which has dropped precipitously since Brexit. Even as the Bank of England and the government are compelled to tighten monetary and fiscal policy in order to contain inflation and prevent the economy from overheating, the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility, or OBR in the UK, has provided a grimmer outlook, projecting a 1.4% GDP contraction in 2023. The OBR has reported last week that its trade prediction was based on the expectation that Brexit would cause the UK's trade intensity, a measure of an economy's interaction with the global economy, to be 15% lower over time than if it had remained in the EU. Long lines, spiraling wait times, and pervasive impression that not nearly enough people are employed to keep everything operating smoothly characterized Britain in 2022. Pubs and hospitals both suffer from a labour shortage in our country. Nevertheless, one of the most frightening examples is that this is happening in adult social care, which is already struggling because of the epidemic. Despite its self-evident relevance, it is blindingly obvious that care is a low-status, low-paying profession with a high staff turnover rate. We need an increasing number of caregivers because, as the elderly population grows, so does the prevalence of chronic health problems. But Brexit has exacerbated a section of our social fabric that was already in trouble. To make matters worse, an increasing number of workers are leaving the care industry due to labour shortages in other industries brought on by Brexit, which has clear ramifications. The vacancy rate in adult social care was 5.9% in May of 2021. It hit 10% in April of last year. Britain seems to be running out of food. Hunger is becoming a more visible issue, and bare shop shelves have become a normal part of life, but we are also throwing away tons of fruit. Before Brexit, Truss made a legendary announcement at the Conservative Party conference that the UK imported 2/3 of its cheese, calling it a disgrace as she half yelled. She must be thrilled about the numerous obstacles that British consumers of European dairy products, and many other EU items for that matter, now have to overcome. The refrigerated aisles of many British supermarkets are frequently so thinly stocked because of Brexit, which is now in full force as a cause of cheesemongering across the UK struggle to keep with costs and supplier concerns when it comes to importing European cheeses. Are you in support of the UK or Europe? If you're in support of the UK, then please click that subscribe button. And if you're a supporter of Europe, then please click that subscribe button. That is, we want all of you to click the subscribe, like, and hit the bell icon. Thank you. Now let's get back to the video. In May, the OBR predicted that the new trade terms between the UK and the EU outlined in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, or TCA, which went into effect on January 1st of 2021. This would result in a 4% decline in long-term productivity. Similar predictions were made by the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee and the former BOE policymaker Michael Saunders. They stated that one of the main factors weakening the UK economy is a reduced trade intensity brought on by Brexit, which lowers productivity growth. According to Saunders, there is abundant evidence that higher trade openness or the intensity of exports and imports boosts productivity growth. The UK has increased trade barriers with Europe, and trade deals that have been done over the countries are largely just maintaining the status quo of trade with third countries. There's been no significant net increase in the trade intensity with non-EU countries, he said. Trade in the UK as a percentage of GDP decreased from over 63% in 2019 to approximately 55% in 2021, and domestic productivity growth is also subpar. The potential production of the UK has flatlined since the fourth quarter of the 2019 year, and will experience weak growth over the following several years, according to estimates from the Bank of England and the OBR. Even before the disastrous mini-budget presented by former Prime Minister Liz Truss in September plunged bond markets into chaos, the UK was downgraded by the New York-based Kroll Bond Rating Agency. Last week, Ken Egan, Director of European Sovereign Credit at KBRA, told CNBC that Brexit was a changing moment for the UK because it exposed a number of structural flaws in the country's economic system. The new government of Rishi Sunak is expected to pursue closer ties with the EU than his predecessors Liz Truss and Boris Johnson. However, out of concern over alienating voters in crucial pro-Brexit constituencies, both the Conservatives and Labour have rejected any return to institutions that are associated with the EU. However, recent research indicates that the public's mood may be starting to change. In a recent YouGov poll, 56% of people said Britain made the wrong decision to leave the EU in 2016, while 32% thought it was the right decision. The incident that broke into the news on Friday, July 22nd, when the port of Dover declared a critical incident as throngs of people trying to travel to the continent were stranded in 6-hour lines. This was undoubtedly the most dramatic example of how Brexit has upended things that millions of Britons once took for granted, according to observers. Even Jacob Rees-Mogg was forced to concede that his claim that Brexit would not produce delays at Dover was false. The port's chief executive, along with a number of Conservative politicians, laid the blame for understaffing at French border crossings, but there was another, more obvious problem. British travellers now have to go through the bureaucratic ritual of getting their passports stamped rather than the quick-fire checks that they did prior to Brexit. Thousands of Britons are already arriving in Spain, and there have been reports of huge lines at the third nation entry points that they must now use at airports in Mallorca, Ibiza, and Alicante. Even worse, Spanish border guards may now need evidence of a return airline ticket, the address of where the British arrivals are staying, and financial assurances of at least £85 per day. The government has made efforts to repair at least some of the harm that Brexit will unavoidably do to the British research and universities. There is one glaring example. The Turing scheme, which will fund about 40,000 British students annually to work and study abroad, has replaced the UK's participation in the EU's Erasmus Plus programme, which, prior to Brexit, allowed thousands of UK students to study or train in Europe and people from EU countries to do the same here. The UK's universities, what they do, and the people who work and study there have all undergone significant upheaval as a result of Brexit. There was a 40% decrease in the number of EU students travelling to the UK between 2020 and 2021. Academics report that their European counterparts are becoming less eager to work here, in part because Brexit has created an endless number of obstacles. Teaching and research frequently depend on people being able to relocate from one institution to another, frequently with their families. What do you think? Do you think the UK will face a lot more recession? Comment down your thoughts down in the comment section below. Refer to other videos on our YouTube channel for more information, and also smash that subscribe, like, and bell icons. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you in the next video.